Rainwater slid down the back of my neck as I turned slowly toward the car. The metal cuffs glinted under the highway lights. The younger officer hesitated for a second. I saw it in his eyes. He was not sure anymore. The older one was. "Hands behind your back," he said. His voice stayed flat. Professional. Like this was routine. Maybe for him, it was. My fingers tightened once beside my leg. Then I let them go still. The transplant cooler sat open just enough for cold vapor to curl into the rain. That made my chest tighten harder than the cuffs. "Do not touch the container again," I said. "It has to stay cold." The older officer ignored me. He kept one hand on my shoulder while the younger officer stepped closer with the restraints. Behind us, cars hissed past on wet pavement. Nobody slowed down. Nobody looked twice. The radio on the cruiser crackled again. "Unit 12, be advised, Monroe Avenue gate remains locked until medical escort arrives." The younger officer blinked. "Gate?" he asked quietly. The older one took the cuffs from him. "People fake credentials all the time." He pulled my wrists together. Tight. Especially at night. The metal clicked shut around my hands. Cold steel against skin still stained with surgical scrub soap. I looked toward the city again. St. Mercy rose above the rain like a pale blur of white glass and emergency lights. Somewhere inside that building, Lily Brooks was still open on an operating table. 8 years old. 72 pounds. Dilated cardiomyopathy. I had promised her mother I would be there before they started bypass. My phone started vibrating again inside the car. The sound seemed louder now. More desperate. The younger officer glanced toward it. "Sir, search the vehicle," the older officer said. That was the third escalation. My jaw tightened. "You break that seal, the tissue may become unusable. Then maybe you should have obeyed the speed limit." He handed the cuffs to the younger officer and walked toward my driver's seat. Rainwater dripped from the edge of his cap onto the leather interior. He picked up my hospital identification badge between 2 fingers. "Dr. Marcus Hale," he read aloud. "Fancy card." Then he saw the dashboard monitor. A blinking green icon pulsed beside the hospital access system. "Authorized trauma route active." The younger officer stepped closer to look. "I have seen those before," he muttered. The older officer did not answer. He pressed the screen instead. The monitor immediately flashed red. "Route connection lost." Somewhere in the distance, a dull mechanical alarm echoed through the rain. I closed my eyes for 1 second. That system controlled the Monroe emergency corridor. Without the signal, the gate defaulted shut for security lockdown. Ambulances rerouted automatically. Trauma traffic stalled. "You just killed the route," I said quietly. For the first time, his expression shifted. Small. Barely visible. But there. The younger officer looked between both of us. "Sir, maybe we should call this in first." Before the older officer could answer, another voice exploded through the radio. Loud. Sharp. Panicked. "Which unit disabled Monroe access?" Silence hit the shoulder of the highway. Even the rain seemed softer for half a breath. The older officer grabbed the radio. "Unit 12 conducting investigation." Reconnected immediately, dispatch snapped back. "We have 3 incoming emergency vehicles diverted downtown." The younger officer stared at me now. Really stared. At the scrubs. The blood stains. The transplant seal. The access monitor. His grip on the cuffs loosened slightly. The older officer did not notice. He was looking at the flashing red dashboard screen. Another call came through my car speaker before anyone could stop it. This time it was not a nurse. It was a child. Weak. Breathless. Dr. Hale. Lily's voice sounded small beneath the static. You said you were coming. Nobody moved after that. Lily's voice disappeared into static. Then the call dropped. Nobody spoke for a moment. Rain tapped against the hood of the cruiser in soft uneven bursts. The younger officer looked down at the cuffs around my wrists. His face had changed. The certainty was gone now. The older officer reached for my car radio and shut the speaker off completely. Sir, the younger one said carefully, that sounded real. Everybody sounds real. When they are desperate, the older officer replied. But his voice no longer carried the same weight. He looked back at the dashboard monitor. The red warning still flashed across the screen. Route connection lost. Somewhere downtown, another ambulance siren wailed through the rain. Faint. Distant. Delayed. Dispatch came through again. Louder this time. Unit 12, respond immediately. The older officer pressed the radio button. Go ahead. St. Mercy Trauma Corridor remains offline. We have cardiac transport rerouting 6 miles south. 6 miles. In normal traffic, maybe 12 minutes. In this storm, longer. Too long for somebody already dying. The younger officer rubbed rainwater from his forehead. Sir, maybe we should uncuff him. The older officer stared at me instead. Long enough to search my face for panic. Or anger. Or a lie. I gave him none of it. I was too tired to waste energy on pride. You can call St. Mercy yourself, I said. Ask for Dr. Evelyn Cho in operating room 3. He hesitated. That hesitation mattered. People only pause when doubt finally enters the room. Another gust of wind pushed rain sideways across the highway shoulder. My scrubs clung cold against my skin. I could still smell antiseptic beneath the storm. I had left the operating floor 42 minutes earlier. Long enough for the donor tissue to stay viable. Not long enough for mistakes. The younger officer glanced toward the cooler again. How much time does the tissue have? He asked quietly. Not enough for this. The older officer exhaled hard through his nose. Then he finally reached for his shoulder microphone. Dispatch, patch me through to St. Mercy Trauma. Static crackled between us. For a second, only rain answered. Then a woman picked up. Fast. Breathless. Trauma desk. This is Highway Patrol Unit 12. We need verification on Dr. Marcus Hale. There was no pause on her end. No checking. No uncertainty. Where is he? She asked immediately. The older officer straightened slightly. He is currently detained during investigation. Silence hit the line. Then came shouting in the background. Footsteps. A monitor alarm. Someone saying pressure was dropping. Again. The nurse came back breathing harder now. You need to release him now. The younger officer looked at me again. Not suspicious anymore. Just uneasy. The older officer kept his voice controlled. Ma'am, we are following procedure. Procedure, she snapped. A child is open on that table. More voices rose behind her. Metal trays clattered. Someone called for blood products. The operating room sounded like it was coming apart inch by inch. Then another voice cut in. Calm. Older. Sharp enough to stop the noise behind it. Put me through. I recognized Dr. Cho immediately. Even through static, her voice carried authority. Officer, she said, Dr. Hale is leading this transplant. Rainwater dripped from the edge of the older officer's sleeve. He did not answer right away. Dr. Cho continued. The donor tissue in that container belongs to Lily Brooks. Age 8. We lose viability in under 40 minutes. The younger officer's eyes widened slightly. He looked down at his watch without meaning to. 38 minutes had already passed. Do you understand what I am saying? Dr. Cho asked. The older officer swallowed once. Barely visible. Yes, ma'am. Then why is my surgeon still on the highway? The question stayed hanging in the rain. Heavy. Ugly. Real. The older officer slowly lowered the radio from his mouth. Somewhere behind us, thunder rolled low across the city. Then his phone started ringing. The older officer stared at the ringing phone in his hand like it had suddenly gained weight. Rainwater slid down his jawline and disappeared beneath his collar. The screen glowed bright against the dark highway shoulder. Chief Vaughn. The younger officer saw the name too. His posture changed immediately. Straighter. Tighter. Sir, he said under his breath. The older officer answered without taking his eyes off me. Chief. Even through the storm, her voice cut sharp through the speaker. Tell me why Monroe Trauma Access is offline. No greeting. No pause. The older officer cleared his throat once. Possible criminal transport investigation. Against who? Driver identified as Marcus Hale. Silence. Not empty silence. Dangerous silence. Then came one slow breath through the phone. You stopped Dr. Hale. The older officer finally looked uncertain. It was small, but real. The vehicle matched a speed alert and, do you understand what is happening at St. Mercy right now? She interrupted. The younger officer lowered his eyes toward the wet pavement. Chief Vaughn kept talking. Calm. Controlled. Worse than yelling. 3 emergency units are backed up because Monroe Corridor shut down. Trauma routing is failing across downtown. Thunder rolled low overhead. I watched the older officer grip tighten around the phone. Chief, we were following procedure. Procedure does not include shutting down a transplant route. Her words hit harder than the rain. A passing truck sprayed water across the shoulder. Cold mist soaked my scrubs again. The cuffs pressed harder into my wrists every second my hand stayed behind my back. Chief Vaughn spoke again. Release him immediately. The older officer hesitated. Just long enough to make things worse. Sir, the younger officer whispered, we need to uncuff him now. But the older officer's pride had not caught up to reality yet. That happens sometimes. Men build their decisions one layer at a time. Then suddenly the truth arrives too fast for them to climb back down cleanly. Chief, he said carefully, we still have not verified the contents of the container. I closed my eyes briefly. The younger officer looked horrified. Even dispatch went silent for half a second. Then Chief Vaughn's voice dropped lower. Officer Mercer. So that was his name. Daniel Mercer. If you break federal transplant seal protocol tonight, she said, your career will end before sunrise. The rain kept falling. Mercer swallowed once. His face looked different now. Not angry. Cornered. His flashlight beam drifted back toward the cooler sitting open inside my car. White vapor still curled from the chilled interior. The transport monitor beside it blinked yellow now instead of green. Temperature variance warning. Not critical yet. But getting there. The younger officer stepped closer to the car window. Sir, he said quietly, the coolant level is dropping. Mercer pressed a hand against the bridge of his nose. For the first time all night, he looked tired instead of certain. My shoulders ached from the cuffs. My fingers had started going numb. I flexed them once behind my back. Small movement. Enough to bring pain shooting up my wrists. Mercer noticed. His eyes dropped to the restraints. Then to the blood stains across my sleeve. Then back to my face. He finally saw what exhaustion actually looked like. Not fear. Not guilt. Exhaustion. How long has she been under? He asked me quietly. 51 minutes, I answered. His jaw tightened. The younger officer looked toward the city skyline. The hospital lights flickered faintly through sheets of rain. Sir, he said again, more firmly this time, we are out of time. Another alarm suddenly chirped from inside my car. Sharp. Repeating. I knew that sound instantly. The transport monitor had switched from warning to countdown mode. The cooler temperature was rising too fast. Mercer heard it too. So did Chief Vaughn through the open line. What was that? She asked. I looked straight at Mercer when I answered. That is the sound of tissue dying. Nobody moved after that. Then Mercer reached for the cuffs. The metal clicked open around my wrists. Blood rushed back into my hands in sharp burning waves. Mercer stepped back immediately after removing the cuffs, like even touching them now bothered him. The younger officer exhaled quietly beside us. Neither man spoke for a second. The alarm inside my car kept chirping. Fast. Mechanical. Unforgiving. I moved toward the driver door without wasting another breath. Do not slam the cooler, I said as I reached inside. The temperature is unstable. Mercer nodded once. Quick. Tight. Almost automatic. That surprised me more than the cuffs coming off. I grabbed the transport monitor and checked the reading. 41 degrees Fahrenheit and climbing. Too warm. My stomach tightened. How bad? The younger officer asked. Bad enough. I adjusted the coolant chamber and resealed the lid carefully. My fingers moved on instinct now. Muscle memory. Thousands of hours inside operating rooms. Thousands more trying to keep people alive long enough to reach them. Rainwater. Dripped from my sleeves onto the pavement while I worked. Mercer stood beside the open door watching every movement. Not suspicious anymore. Studying. Learning too late what he had interrupted. His phone was still connected to Chief Vaughn. Her voice came through faintly. Mercer, report. He looked toward the city lights before answering. Dr. Hale is being released. Being, she repeated sharply. He should already be moving. Mercer's jaw tightened again. Shame does strange things to a person's posture. It makes strong men suddenly look older. Understood, Chief. He ended the call slowly. The younger officer stepped toward the cruiser. I can reopen Monroe remotely from the patrol terminal. Do it, Mercer said immediately. Fingers tapped against the keyboard inside the vehicle. Rain hammered the roof overhead. Then a loud electronic tone cut through the storm. Route connection restored. Somewhere in the distance, another siren shifted direction toward the hospital. I finally breathed deeper for the first time all night. But the clock was still bleeding minutes. Mercer looked toward the bypass entrance ahead. Traffic backed up near exit 9, he said. Construction barriers. I checked the monitor again. 34 minutes before critical tissue failure. Maybe less now after the temperature spike. Then move them, I said. Mercer looked at me hard for 1 second. Then he reached for his radio. Dispatch, clear Monroe bypass immediately. Full emergency corridor. The younger officer stared at him. Sir, that requires supervisor approval. Then they can yell at me later. That was the first human thing he had said all night. Dispatch crackled back with confusion and overlapping voices. Mercer ignored all of it. He climbed into the driver's seat of the cruiser and hit the lights again. Red and blue flooded the rain-soaked highway shoulder. Different now. Not threatening. Urgent. Follow me, he said. I slid behind my wheel. My hands trembled slightly as I gripped it. Not fear. Fatigue. Too much adrenaline held inside the body too long starts turning into exhaustion. The younger officer stepped toward my window before I pulled away. Dr. Hale. I looked up at him. Rain streamed off the brim of his hat. I am sorry, he said quietly. Simple words. Honest ones. I nodded once. Nothing more. There was no time for comfort now. Mercer's cruiser pulled onto the bypass first. Tires sprayed water into the dark. I followed inches behind him. The sirens screamed across the wet concrete walls as we accelerated toward downtown. Cars began shifting aside ahead of us. Headlights blurred across the storm like pale streaks underwater. The city skyline grew larger through the rain. Closer. But not close enough. The transport monitor suddenly beeped again. Louder this time. I glanced down. Warning. Internal temperature rising. My chest tightened instantly. The coolant system had not recovered from the shutdown. I reached toward the cooler, adjusting the stabilizer valve with one hand while steering with the other. Mercer's voice burst through the emergency channel speaker connected to my dashboard. Stay with me, Doctor. Then brake lights exploded ahead of us. Mercer's cruiser swerved hard left as a wall of stopped traffic came into view. Red brake lights stretched across the bypass like a river of blood through the rain. Cars sat frozen bumper to bumper beneath flashing construction arrows. Water sprayed from Mercer's tires as he cut onto the emergency shoulder. I followed immediately behind him. Concrete barriers rose inches from my driver's side window. Too narrow. Too fast. The cooler alarm kept pulsing beside me. Every sound inside the car felt sharper now. The sirens. The rain. My own breathing. Mercer's voice burst through the dashboard speaker again. State Cruise shut 2 lanes down an hour ago. Can we get through? I asked. He did not answer right away. That answer told me enough. The emergency shoulder narrowed ahead where orange barrels crowded the roadway. Beyond them, a maintenance truck blocked half the passage. Mercer accelerated anyway. His cruiser lights washed blue and red across the wet concrete walls. Workers near the barriers jumped back and stared. One man lifted a flashlight toward us, confused. Another pointed toward the narrowing lane ahead. The transport monitor chirped again. 31 minutes. The coolant warning had turned orange now. Not critical yet. Close. I tightened one hand around the steering wheel while steadying the cooler with the other. My wrist still ached where the cuffs had been. The skin burned every time I flexed my fingers. Mercer's cruiser squeezed past the first barrier by inches. Metal scraped somewhere against his passenger side. Sparks flashed briefly beneath the rain. He never slowed down. I stayed directly behind him. The shoulder became tighter ahead. Water pooled across broken pavement. My tires slid once before catching again. Stay close, Mercer said through the speaker. Do not stop. The words sounded different coming from him now. Not like commands. Like responsibility. Another line of traffic appeared beyond the construction zone. Dead still. Drivers pressed against windows trying to see what the sirens were chasing through the storm. Some moved aside immediately. Others froze in confusion. A delivery van blocked part of the gap ahead. Mercer leaned on the cruiser horn. Long aggressive. The van finally shifted enough for him to squeeze through. Barely. I followed with inches to spare. My mirror clipped an orange cone and sent it spinning into the rain. The cooler alarm changed tone suddenly. Sharper now. My stomach tightened hard. I looked down. Coolant failure imminent. Not yet. Please not yet. I reached toward the stabilizer again while keeping the car steady between the barriers. The cooling chamber felt warmer under my fingertips than it should have. Too warm. Doctor? Mercer's voice crackled through the speaker. How bad? I swallowed once before answering. If the tissue temperature crosses 45 degrees, viability starts collapsing. Silence answered for a second. Then Mercer cursed quietly under his breath. We burst free from the construction choke point into open roadway again. Downtown towers rose larger ahead of us now, glowing pale through sheets of rain. St. Mercy stood near the center of it all. 23 floors of white light cutting through the storm. Close enough to see. Still too far away. Dispatch suddenly broke through the radio chatter. Unit 12, be advised. Flooding reported near Monroe Underpass. Mercer grabbed the radio instantly. Depth. Static crackled. Then came the answer. Approximately 18 inches and rising. Mercer hit the steering wheel once with his palm. Damn it. 18 inches at highway speed could kill traction completely. My eyes flicked toward the monitor again. 27 minutes left. Maybe less. Mercer's cruiser shifted lanes ahead of me. Fast. Decisive. Taking Riverside exit, he said. It is longer but higher ground. How much longer? A pause. 7 minutes. 7 extra minutes. My jaw tightened so hard it hurt. But flooded underpass traffic would cost even more if we stalled. Mercer knew it too. We exited hard onto Riverside Boulevard. The city streets looked worse here. Rainwater surged along curbs. Storefront reflections rippled across flooded intersections. Pedestrians stood beneath awnings staring at the screaming sirens rushing past them. Then my phone rang again through the dashboard speaker. Dr. Cho this time. I answered immediately. Marcus, she said, breathing hard, Lily is crashing. Dr. Cho's breathing filled the speaker for half a second before she spoke again. We lost stable rhythm twice. Rain hammered my windshield hard enough to blur the road ahead. Mercer's cruiser cut through the flooded intersection in front of me, lights flashing across storefront windows and soaked brick walls. How long? I asked. We are trying to hold her, Dr. Cho said. Metal clanged somewhere behind her. Voices moved fast in the background. But Marcus, we cannot stay on bypass forever. I tightened my grip on the wheel. My knuckles ached white against the leather. The transport monitor flashed 24 minutes remaining. Maybe less now. Time estimates always become lies once panic enters the room. Keep her cooled, I said. Reduce flow pressure another 10%. Dr. Cho hesitated. That puts her at risk. So does waiting. Silence. Then a short exhale. Understood. The call ended. Mercer's voice immediately replaced it through the emergency channel. Bridge ahead is partially flooded. Can we clear it? We are about to find out. The city blurred around us in streaks of red and gold reflections across standing water. Streetlights shimmered on flooded pavement like broken glass. Pedestrians huddled beneath bus shelters turned their heads as the sirens screamed past. Some stepped back instinctively when they saw the cruiser pushing through the storm. Others just stared. Mercer accelerated harder. His rear tires sprayed water high into the air as we climbed toward Riverside Bridge. The river below looked black beneath the rain. Wind slammed against my car as soon as we reached the incline. The bridge surface glistened slick and uneven beneath flashing emergency lights. Then I saw the stalled vehicles. 3 cars sat frozen near the center lane with hazard lights blinking weakly through the storm. Water pooled around their tires. Mercer swerved around the first one cleanly. The second barely left enough space. I followed within inches again. The cooler alarm chirped louder beside me. The stabilizer valve was failing completely now. I glanced down. Internal temperature 43 degrees. My chest tightened instantly. 2 more degrees and tissue degradation would begin. I reached for the emergency coolant release beneath the container handle. My fingers slipped once from rainwater still clinging to my skin. "Come on," I muttered quietly. The valve finally released with a sharp hiss. White vapor spilled from the vent ports inside the cooler. The monitor dropped 1 degree almost immediately. Not enough. But something. Mercer's voice came back through the speaker. "Tighter now. Doctor, stay behind me." Ahead of us, flashing construction lights reflected off standing floodwater near the far side of the bridge. A city maintenance truck blocked half the roadway. One worker waved both arms wildly as Mercer approached. Mercer never slowed. He leaned on the horn and pushed the cruiser directly through the narrow remaining lane. Water exploded beneath his tires. My car hit the flooded section a second later. The steering wheel jerked hard left. For one terrifying second the tires lost grip completely. The cooler slid sideways against the passenger seat restraints. My heartbeat slammed once against my ribs. Then traction caught again. I corrected hard and stayed behind the cruiser. The maintenance worker shouted something as we passed. Neither of us heard it over the sirens and rain. Downtown stood directly ahead now. Close enough to see individual hospital windows glowing against the storm. St. Mercy rose above the surrounding buildings like a lighthouse in dirty weather. The emergency helipad lights pulsed faint blue against the clouds. Mercer's cruiser suddenly slowed near the bridge exit. Not by choice. Traffic had stopped again. Completely. A city bus sat sideways across the intersection ahead. Floodwater surged around its wheels while dozens of trapped cars boxed the roadway shut. Mercer grabbed the radio instantly. "Dispatch, Riverside blocked." Static answered first. Then Chief Vaughn herself came through. "How far are you from St. Mercy?" Mercer looked toward the glowing hospital tower ahead. "Close enough to touch. Too far to reach." "Less than a mile," he answered. Chief Vaughn went silent for 1 second. Then she said something that changed everything. "Then leave the cars." Mercer slammed the cruiser into park before the words even finished coming through the speaker. Rain exploded against both vehicles as he jumped out into the flooded intersection. "Doctor," he shouted through the storm. "Bring the cooler." I killed my engine and grabbed the container immediately. The weight hit my arms harder than before. Not because it was heavy. Because my body was finally running out of adrenaline. Water splashed around my shoes as I stepped into the street. Cold rain soaked through my scrubs instantly. Ahead of us, the city bus sat crooked across the intersection like a wall. Cars jammed every lane beyond it. Horns blared uselessly into the storm. St. Mercy stood less than a mile away now. So close I could see silhouettes moving behind upper-floor windows. Mercer reached the sidewalk first and turned back toward me. "Can you run?" he asked. I adjusted the cooler against my chest. "I do not have a choice." He nodded once. Then he hit the cruiser siren again. The sound tore through the flooded street like a blade. People turned immediately. Drivers rolled windows down. Pedestrians stepped aside. Beneath dripping awnings, Mercer raised one arm and started clearing a path through the sidewalk crowd. "Emergency," he shouted. "Move." His voice echoed off wet brick buildings and storefront glass. I stayed directly behind him, gripping the cooler tight against my chest while we pushed through the rain. The monitor screen blinked beneath the lid restraints. 20 minutes remaining. Maybe less. My legs already felt heavier than they should have. Too many hours awake. Too much stress packed into one night. Water splashed high around our ankles as we crossed another intersection. Mercer never stopped moving. The same man who had cuffed me on the highway was now physically clearing traffic for me through downtown floodwater. Life changes fast when consequences finally become visible. A taxi blocked the next crosswalk. Mercer slammed both palms against the hood. "Move the car." The driver stared at him in shock before reversing hard out of the lane. We cut past the bumper and kept running. My breathing grew rougher now. Hot air burned in my throat each time I inhaled cold rain. The cooler alarm chirped again beneath my arm. One sharp warning tone. I looked down while moving. Internal temperature 44 degrees. Too close. Much too close. "Mercer," I called out. He looked back instantly. "What?" "We are losing the tissue." His face tightened hard. He scanned the street ahead quickly. Then his eyes locked onto something across the next intersection. A police motorcycle parked beneath a pharmacy awning. Officer unattended. Engine still running. Mercer changed direction immediately. "This way." We cut across the flooded crosswalk toward the bike. A uniformed motorcycle officer stepped out from beneath the awning just as Mercer reached him. "What are you doing?" the officer shouted over the rain. Mercer flashed his badge without slowing down. "Medical emergency." He grabbed the spare helmet from the rear compartment and shoved it toward me. "Hold the cooler tight." I stared at the motorcycle once. Then at the slick rain-covered street ahead. "You are driving?" Mercer swung onto the bike first. "You trust me yet?" The question hit strange in the middle of everything. Honest. Exhausted. Human. Another cooler alarm answered before I could speak. I climbed on behind him and locked one arm around the transplant container. Mercer accelerated hard into the storm. The motorcycle shot between stranded vehicles with inches to spare. Rain hit my face like needles at that speed. Sirens screamed again as we tore through downtown traffic. Storefront lights streaked past in blurred ribbons of color. One wrong turn now would kill the timeline completely. Mercer leaned hard around a flooded corner without slowing. 3 blocks, he shouted over the engine. St. Mercy filled the skyline directly ahead of us now. Then every light on the street suddenly went dark. The motorcycle headlights vanished with the rest of the street in a single blink. 1 second the city glowed wet and alive around us. The next, everything dropped into darkness. Only the police strobes still flashed red and blue through the storm. Mercer slowed instinctively as traffic lights ahead died across the intersection. Store alarms started chirping somewhere nearby. People shouted beneath dark storefront awnings. Rain hammered against my face while I tightened my grip around the cooler. "Power outage?" I shouted. "Look citywide," Mercer yelled back. The motorcycle engine roared louder as we pushed deeper into downtown darkness. St. Mercy still stood ahead of us, but half the building lights had disappeared now. My stomach dropped immediately. "Backup generators. Please let the generators hold." The cooler monitor flashed beneath my arm again. Internal temperature 44.8 degrees. Too close. Far too close. I adjusted the emergency vent manually while balancing against the bike. My fingers shook harder now from cold and exhaustion. Mercer leaned around another stalled vehicle and accelerated through a dead intersection. Without streetlights, the rain felt heavier somehow. Buildings rose around us like black walls broken only by emergency flashers and distant ambulance lights. Then my phone rang through the medical earpiece still hanging loose around my collar. "Dr. Cho again." I answered immediately. "Tell me the generators came online." Silence. For half a second. "Too long." "Partial failure," she said finally. My chest tightened hard. Behind her I could hear backup alarms pulsing through the hospital corridors. Operating rooms 1 and 2 are stable, she continued. But pediatric wing lost pressure systems for 30 seconds. Mercer heard enough through the rain to glance back at me. Can they keep her alive? I asked. Dr. Cho exhaled slowly into the line. We are trying. That answer hurt worse than honesty. A city bus suddenly rolled halfway through the next dead intersection without warning. Mercer swerved sharply right. Tires slid across standing water. The motorcycle fishtailed once before catching traction again. The cooler slammed against my ribs hard enough to knock breath from my lungs. We missed the bus by feet. Sorry, Mercer shouted. Do not apologize, I answered. Just move. The hospital tower loomed larger ahead now. I could finally make out the emergency entrance canopy glowing beneath generator power. Ambulances crowded the lower bay with lights flashing through the rain. Close. So close. Another cooler alarm sounded. Continuous now. Critical warning. I looked down immediately. Internal temperature 45 degrees. The numbers burned against my eyes. Tissue degradation had started. Not complete failure yet. But the margin was disappearing minute by minute. Mercer, I shouted over the storm. We are crossing threshold. He accelerated harder without answering. The motorcycle shot past stalled traffic and flooded crosswalks while rainwater sprayed high behind us. Somewhere overhead, thunder cracked loud enough to shake the street. Then the hospital disappeared again behind a line of emergency vehicles blocking the final avenue. Fire trucks. Ambulances. Police cruisers. Total gridlock. Mercer cursed sharply and braked hard beside the sidewalk. We are not getting through that. I climbed off the motorcycle before it fully stopped. My legs nearly buckled from exhaustion and cold. Mercer caught my shoulder instantly to steady me. Strange how quickly touch changes once suspicion dies. How far? I asked. He looked toward the hospital entrance beyond the blocked avenue. 2 blocks. The cooler alarm kept screaming between us. Continuous now. Mercer looked at the container. Then at me. Rainwater streamed down both our faces beneath flashing emergency lights. Can you still operate? He asked quietly. I stared toward St. Mercy through the storm. Through the ambulances. Through the darkness swallowing half the city. I have to, I said. Mercer nodded once. Then he pulled something from his jacket pocket. A master emergency access key. Follow me, he said. I know another entrance. Mercer turned sharply into a narrow alley beside an abandoned pharmacy. Rainwater rushed along the cracked pavement like dark river currents beneath our feet. The cooler alarm still screamed in my arms. Continuous now. Relentless. My shoulders burned from holding the container so tightly for so long. The hospital tower rose above the alley walls ahead of us, pale against the storm clouds. Generator lights flickered unevenly across several floors. Some windows stayed dark. Too dark. Mercer ran ahead through the rain and stopped beside a heavy steel service gate half hidden behind dumpsters and utility pipes. He jammed the emergency access key into the lock. Nothing happened. Come on, he muttered under his breath. He tried again, harder this time. The lock finally clicked. Metal groaned open against the wind. Warm air spilled from the tunnel beyond, carrying the smell of bleach, steam pipes, and hospital laundry. Familiar. Sharp. Alive. Service corridor, Mercer said. Leads beneath the west wing. I stepped inside immediately. Water dripped from my scrubs onto the concrete floor while the steel door slammed shut behind us. The sudden silence hit almost harder than the storm outside. No thunder. No traffic. Only the hum of emergency generators vibrating through the tunnel walls. My breathing sounded rough in the enclosed space. Mercer pointed down the corridor. Elevators should be 200 feet ahead. We started moving fast through the narrow underground passage. Fluorescent backup lights flickered weakly overhead. Pipes rattled somewhere above us each time generator power surged. The cooler monitor flashed bright red beneath my arm. Internal. Temperature 45.4 degrees. My pulse slammed once in my throat. Mercer saw my face change. "How close?" he asked quietly. "Too close." He nodded once and increased his pace. We rounded another corner. Laundry carts lined one wall beside stacks of sealed medical linens. Somewhere ahead, an alarm pulsed faintly through the building. Slow. Rhythmic. The sound hospitals make when systems start failing one layer at a time. My phone rang again. "Dr. Cho." I answered while still moving. "Marcus?" Her voice sounded thinner now. Strained. We lost stable pressure again. My footsteps slowed instinctively. Mercer looked back immediately. "How long?" I asked. Silence hit the line for one terrible second. Then she answered softly. "Minutes." The word hollowed the air around me. We reached the elevator bank at the end of the tunnel. Every indicator light was dead except one. Service elevator C, flickering emergency power only. Mercer slammed the call button repeatedly. Nothing. Then finally the ancient cables above us groaned alive somewhere deep in the shaft. Slow. Too slow. "Stairs," I said immediately. 23 floors, Mercer answered. "We will lose more time waiting." He looked at the cooler. Then at the elevator. Then back toward the dark stairwell door beside us. Decision crossed his face visibly this time. Heavy. Real. He grabbed the stairwell handle and pulled it open. Hot stale air rushed down from the upper levels smelling faintly of smoke and disinfectant. "Go," he said. We started climbing immediately. Concrete steps echoed beneath our soaked shoes while emergency lights blinked weakly overhead. Floor 7. 8. 9. My lungs burned harder with every level. The cooler felt twice as heavy now. Sweat mixed with rainwater beneath my collar despite the cold. Mercer stayed one step ahead the entire time, clearing the path upward. Not once did he ask me to slow down. Somewhere above us a woman cried out briefly behind one of the emergency doors. Hospital chaos spilling through the building. We reached floor 14 before my legs finally staggered once. Mercer caught the cooler instantly before it slipped. "I have it," he said. I shook my head. "Hard." "No," the word came out rougher than I intended. He released it immediately. We kept climbing. My chest hurt now with every breath. The monitor flashed again beneath my arm. 45.7 degrees. Then all the stairwell lights suddenly went black. Darkness swallowed the stairwell so completely that for 1 second we both stopped moving. Only the cooler monitor still glowed red against my chest. 45.7 degrees. Critical. Somewhere below us, backup generators groaned through the walls like exhausted engines fighting to stay alive. Mercer pulled a flashlight from his jacket immediately. A narrow white beam cut through the black stairwell. Concrete walls. Wet footprints. Endless stairs still climbing above us. "Keep moving," he said. His voice sounded rough now. Tired. We climbed again. Fast. My legs trembled harder with every floor. Sweat ran cold down my spine beneath the soaked scrubs. The cooler alarm had changed from chirping to one long continuous tone. I knew what that meant. Tissue viability was collapsing minute by minute now. Floor 16. 17. 18. The flashlight bounced against steel railings and emergency signs as Mercer climbed ahead of me. My breathing echoed harshly through the stairwell. Too loud. Too uneven. "Dr. Cho," I said between breaths into the earpiece. Static answered first. Then her voice finally returned through interference. "We lost one generator on pediatric." My chest tightened again. "Is Lily stable?" Silence. Too much silence. Then came the soft sound of a monitor alarm somewhere near her. "Marcus," she said quietly, "if you are not here in the next few minutes, I do not know if I can hold her." The line crackled and died. I stopped for half a second on the stairs. Not from fear. From exhaustion finally catching my body all at once. Mercer looked back immediately. The flashlight beam hit my face directly. "How many floors?" I asked. "4 more." My knees nearly buckled again. Mercer stepped down one stair toward me. "Give me the cooler." "No, you are fading." "No," the word came harder this time. Sharper. I tightened both arms around the container and forced myself upward again. Mercer watched me for one long second before turning back toward the stairs. He did not argue again. That mattered more than he probably understood. Floor 19. 20. Every breath now burned through my chest like cold metal. My hands had started going numb from carrying the cooler. The red warning light reflected against the stairwell walls with every step. Then somewhere above us, a door burst open. A nurse rushed downward carrying emergency supply bags against her chest. She froze when she saw us climbing through the blackout. "Dr. Hale," she gasped. I nodded once while moving. Her eyes dropped immediately to the cooler. Then widened. "They are waiting for you." Mercer stepped aside so she could pass. The nurse paused briefly beside him. "Thank you," she whispered before hurrying down the dark stairwell. Mercer stood still for half a second after she disappeared below us. Strange expression on his face. Like someone hearing a language he did not expect directed at him. We reached floor 21. Then 22. The hospital alarm sounded louder here. Closer. I could smell smoke faintly now beneath the bleach and antiseptic. Somewhere nearby, emergency ventilation systems struggled unevenly against the outage. Mercer shoved open the 23rd floor door. Bright emergency backup lights flooded the hallway beyond us. Doctors and nurses rushed between operating rooms under generator power. Somebody shouted for blood units down the corridor. Another voice called for respiratory backup. The entire floor felt like it was holding its breath. Dr. Evelyn Cho appeared at the far end of the hallway in green surgical scrubs and a face shield hanging loose around her neck. The second she saw the cooler, relief crashed visibly across her face. "Marcus." I stepped toward her as fast as my legs allowed. She grabbed the container immediately and checked the monitor. 46 degrees now. Her expression tightened. "Can you still use it?" Mercer asked quietly from behind me. Dr. Cho looked directly at me before answering. "He is about to try." Then the operating room doors opened. Warm surgical light spilled into the hallway as the operating room doors swung open. The smell hit me instantly. Antiseptic. Sterile plastic. Heated machinery. Familiar enough to cut straight through exhaustion. Dr. Cho handed the cooler back into my arms one last time. "We have maybe one chance left," she said quietly. Nurses rushed around us carrying trays and sealed instruments beneath the dim emergency power. Every face looked tight. Focused. Tired. The storm outside had reached inside the hospital now. You could feel it in the pace of everyone moving. Mercer stood several feet back near the wall, soaked from head to toe beneath flickering hallway lights. He looked completely out of place there among surgeons and surgical staff. But nobody asked him to leave. Dr. Cho glanced toward him briefly. "He got you here?" she asked. I nodded once. Something shifted across her face after that. Small. Human. Then she pushed the operating room doors fully open. Move. I stepped inside. The room hummed with backup generator power and machine noise. Monitor screens glowed green and gold against the dimmed lighting overhead. Lily Brooks lay motionless beneath sterile drapes at the center of the room. So small. Smaller than I remembered from pre-op. Her mother stood behind the observation glass outside the room with both hands pressed against her mouth. I could see tears even from there. The heart monitor above Lily showed unstable rhythm crawling unevenly across the screen. Too slow. Too fragile. Temperature? I asked immediately. 91 degrees, a nurse answered. Pressure unstable. I moved toward the scrub station while another surgical tech carefully opened the cooler beside Dr. Cho. Everyone watched silently as the vapor rolled out into the operating room air. Dr. Cho lifted the transport chamber insert and inspected the tissue immediately. No one spoke. Not even the machine sounded loud anymore. Finally she looked up at me. There is still viability. Relief moved through the room in one invisible wave. Small. Careful. Nobody trusted hope fully yet. Neither did I. I scrubbed and fast beneath hot water while my hands shook from exhaustion. Not panic. Physical collapse waiting for permission to happen. I stared at my own reflection. Briefly in the stainless steel panel beside the sink. Bloodshot eyes. Wet skin. Cuff marks still red around both wrists. Then I pushed the image away. No room for that here. A nurse helped secure my gloves while Dr. Cho stepped beside me. Marcus, she said quietly. Can you do this? The room waited for my answer without pretending not to. I looked toward Lily again. 8 years old. Open chest. Failing rhythm. Storm outside. Darkness across half the city. One overheated transplant window hanging by threads. Yes, I answered. My voice sounded calmer than I felt. Dr. Cho nodded once. Then the entire room shifted instantly into motion around us. Instruments moved. Ventilator levels adjusted. Surgical lights repositioned. I stepped to the operating table and placed both hands beside Lily carefully. Steady now. Everything narrowed. The storm disappeared. The sirens disappeared. Even exhaustion disappeared for a little while. There was only the rhythm monitor and the work waiting beneath my hands. Beginning transplant, Dr. Cho announced. Somewhere behind the observation glass, Lily's mother started praying softly into her clasped hands. I leaned forward beneath the surgical lights while generator power flickered once overhead. Then Mercer appeared outside the operating room window. The operating room narrowed down to sound and movement. Nothing else existed anymore. Not the storm outside. Not the blackout. Not the highway. Only the rhythm monitor beside Lily and the failing clock we were still fighting. Pressure dropping, a nurse warned softly. Dr. Cho adjusted the bypass flow without looking away from the monitor. Surgical lights reflected across metal instruments and pale blue gloves. Generator power hummed unevenly overhead. I worked carefully through exhaustion that now felt miles beyond my body. Muscle memory carried the rest. Years inside operating rooms teach your hands to keep moving long after your mind begins fading. The damaged tissue came free slower than I wanted. My fingers felt heavy. Numb in places from cold and strain. But steady. Always steady. Outside the observation window, Lily's mother never moved from the glass. Mercer stood. Several feet behind her now. Silent. Rainwater still dripped from the edge of his jacket onto the polished hallway floor. Every few seconds his eyes shifted from the operating room to the cuff marks still visible around my wrists. Rhythm unstable, Dr. Cho said quietly. The monitor line stumbled unevenly across the screen. One nurse looked down briefly before glancing away again. Nobody in that room needed words to understand how close we still were to losing her. I took one slow breath beneath the surgical mask and continued. The new tissue settled into place. Delicate. Fragile. One chance. Beginning attachment, I said. Instruments changed hands around me instantly. Clamp. Suture. Pressure check. The room moved together now like a single body holding itself tight against disaster. Outside the operating room window, Mercer lowered himself slowly into one of the hallway chairs. For the first time all night, he looked completely exhausted. Not physically. Spiritually. Like the weight of every decision had finally caught him all at once. The monitor sound sharpened suddenly. One long warning tone filled the room. Everything froze for half a breath. Dr. Cho looked directly at me. Marcus. No panic in her voice. That made it heavier somehow. I stared at the monitor. Then at Lily. 8 years old. Storm outside. Half the city dark. One overheated transplant hanging on threads because of minutes nobody could return. I placed both hands carefully where they needed to be. Again, I said quietly. Dr. Cho nodded once. We moved together immediately. Pressure adjustment. Electrical pacing. Another attempt. The generator lights flickered overhead one more time. Then the monitor line jumped. Small at first. Weak. Uneven. But there. One beat. Then another. The room stayed perfectly still waiting for it to fail again. It did not. The rhythm steadied slowly across the screen in soft green pulses. A nurse exhaled shakily beside me. Somebody near the back of the room whispered, "Thank God." Outside the glass, Lily's mother collapsed into tears with both hands covering her face. Mercer stood again immediately, catching her before she slipped against the wall. Neither of them spoke. They just stood there beneath the flickering hallway lights while the storm rattled softly against the hospital windows. I finally stepped back from the operating table. Every muscle in my body suddenly remembered exhaustion all at once. Dr. Cho looked at the monitor. Stable rhythm now. Small. Fragile. Alive. Then she looked at me. You made it in time, she said quietly. I glanced through the observation glass toward Mercer. Water still dripped from his sleeves onto the floor beside the woman he had helped steady. He met my eyes for only a second before looking down at the cuff marks on my wrists again. The storm outside had finally started to quiet. Then Lily squeezed my finger.